Alright, class, today we're going to be talking about a social safety net. This may be something that you've heard of before, but just in different names. Imagine a safety net at the circus. The purpose of the safety net is to prevent people who are performing from falling all the way to the ground. Social safety net, this would be something that we have set up in society that prevents members of our society from falling. We're going to be talking about the social safety net today in the form of the coronavirus aid package. Some of you may have heard about people in our communities getting $1,200 or so from the government because of the coronavirus. If you follow this link, you can learn about all the other parts of the CARES Act. It spent a lot of money on individuals. It gave some money to big corporations to help them. It gave quite a bit of money also to small businesses, to state and local governments, and to hospitals. All of these things, and $2 trillion was spent by the government in order to respond to the coronavirus. What you need to find out is, why would somebody support the government spending $2 trillion at this time? Why would people oppose that? Well, just think about the number of dollars that was. We're going to compare this to something called the New Deal. Now, open up the web page, and the New Deal was a set of different pieces of legislation. I'm going to point out a couple specific ones here. Let's talk about the HR 5755 Industrial Recovery. This is going to create public works projects such as roads, bridges, to create millions of jobs. It's going to be managed by the CWA. Or Senate Bill 598, the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is going to recruit young unemployed men and send them to camps to perform reforestation and conservation work. They're going to go work in the forests and help restore nature. Or the Federal Emergency Relief will allow federal government to give loans to the states so states can operate their own relief programs. The TVA, they're going to build dams to control flooding in the Tennessee Valley. This is going to create jobs, and it's also going to provide electricity to homes and businesses. You can see all of these different things that the federal government was going to try and do, and look at some of the goals, creating jobs. What were they trying to do for the people? It's pretty apparent that the main goal here is to create programs to help people, whether or not that's helping provide them with jobs, protecting their houses, etc., etc. So what was going on that led to this? You've probably heard of the Great Depression. In the 1920s, the stock market was booming. Things were going very, very well. But then, in 1929, in October, people start to see that the stock market itself is only worth what people are willing to invest in it. So people grow a little hesitant about the stock market and start pulling their money out of the stock market. And if people start selling the stocks are only worth what people are willing to pay for them. If everyone is selling, the value of the stock continues going down and down and down and down. As this happens, people lose the money that they invested in it. If people lose their life savings, they don't have money to spend. If they don't have money to spend, they can't buy things. If companies can't sell things, that means those companies are going to go out of business. That means those employees are going to lose their jobs. By the end of during the first 2 months of 1933, 4,004 banks fail, and employment reaches approximately 14 million. That's 25% of the population. 1 out of every 4 working age adults is out of a job. Can you understand why the Great Depression would cause the government to debate a series of pieces of legislation to provide people with jobs? It makes sense, doesn't it? Can you kind of see where the connection is going here? Unemployment today is not as high as during the Great Depression, but it is growing higher and higher. We need to, in section 1, determine why people believe the United States should create policies to support a safety net for citizens who are struggling. In his 1933 inaugural address, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, this is him giving the speech, and this is one of the most famous lines in politics: The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We face common difficulties. Many unemployed citizens face the grim problem of survival. Only a foolish optimist can deny this reality. Let's talk about what he means here. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Have you ever heard of the expression paralyzed by fear? If you're so scared that you don't do anything, what's the consequence? Nothing gets done. Things will only continue to get worse. Roosevelt said, "We are fighting no plague of locusts. The restoration requires we apply social values more noble than the chase of profits. Happiness lies not in money, it lies in the joy of achievement. Our great first task is to put people to work. It can be done in part by direct recruiting by the government itself, treating the task as we would treat the emergency of a war. We now realize our interdependence on each other. We must move as a trained and loyal army willing to sacrifice for the good of all. With this pledge taken, I will take the leadership of this great army of our people. In this national emergency, I ask the Congress for broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency, as great as the power that would be given to me if we were invaded by a foreign enemy." What are some of the ideas in here that Roosevelt gives for reasons we should create the safety net? How does he describe the situation in America? After you've summarized it, make the connection. Are any of these ideas similar to things people would be saying today about unemployment, about the conditions in our country? All right. Let's look at a cartoon. I'm going to focus on Clifford Berryman's "Of course we have to change remedies if we don't get the results." This is FDR. He's dressed up as a doctor, back when doctors visited people's homes. He's talking to Congress, and who is this that's sick? It's Uncle Sam, right? All of these little bottles here, these acronyms, CCC, that stands for Civilian Conservation Corps, all of these are New Deal programs. What is the president seeming to suggest? If the United States is not doing well, who needs to do something about it? Can you see a connection between that and what's being debated today? The CARES Act? Is America doing well? If something needs to be done, who should be the one to do something about it? Okay, let's find out now why some people oppose this kind of social safety net policy. We're going to read a press statement by President Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was the president during the stock market crash. He was the president during the start of the Great Depression. He's going to explain to you why he thinks this is not the right thing to do. In his press release, he said, "This is not an issue as to whether the people are going hungry or cold in the United States. It is solely a question of the best method by which hunger and cold can be prevented. It is a question as to whether the American people on the one hand will maintain the spirit of charity and of mutual self-help through voluntary giving and the responsibility of local government as distinguished on the other hand from appropriations out of the federal treasury for such purposes. My own conviction is strongly that if we break down this sense of responsibility, of individual generosity to individual, and mutual self-help in the country in times of national difficulty, and if we start appropriations of this character, we have not only impaired something infinitely valuable in the life of the American people, but have struck at the roots of self-government. Once this has happened, it is not the cost of a few score millions, but we are faced with the abyss of reliance, it's a trap of relying, in the future upon government charity in some form or other. The money involved is indeed the least of the costs to American ideals and American institutions." So what is Herbert Hoover worried about? If the government creates this social safety net, who are we no longer relying upon? Who will we go to if we need help? Will we not look to each other? Will we not help each other? Herbert Hoover seems to be worried that if we start to depend on the federal government, it's going to have bad consequences for our community. This cartoon should be pretty easy to put together. What we need is another pump from 1933. So think back to the New Deal, all these programs of the government creating government jobs. People are working for the government, they have to get paid. Who's going to be paying them to work a government job? It's going to be the government. And where does the government get their money? You and I, the taxpayers. What's this cartoonist concern about the New Deal? The New Deal pump. Where's all of this money going? FDR, president, pouring more and more money into the New Deal. What's the concern here? Some people are opposed to the social safety net because it's very, how might that be similar to some people's concerns today about the CARES package? Remember that it cost $2 trillion. So the results of the debate. The Great Depression was worsening and worsening, and people thought something had to be done. So the New Deal was passed in 3 different waves. All of these different acronym groups, such as the CCC, the alphabet soup, were aimed at providing 3 different things: relief, recovery, and reform. Millions of Americans were given jobs by these programs. Because they had a job, they had money. They could put food on the table. They could stay in their homes. We can't definitively say that the New Deal ended the Great Depression, because something else happened in the 1930s and 1940s that had a big impact. It was World War II. But still, it put food on the table for lots of people. Here are some local connections. Have any of you seen this building before? The Harley-Davidson shop? That used to be a storage shed for the county. That was a work progress administration building. This building was created not just because this county needed more storage, but more importantly because people in Topeka needed jobs. And if we were going to make this new building, that's going to give people jobs. We should note that these programs didn't just apply to manual laborers, they also hired artists. Have any of you seen this painting before? Aaron Douglas Park. Aaron Douglas was an artist from the Harlem Renaissance, an African American who was from Topeka, who had moved to New York, to an area called Harlem. And the government paid artists to create public works of art. Aaron Douglas was hired to create a painting like this painting actually, in the New York Public Library's 135th Street branch. So you could go to New York and see this painting done by a Topekan. And this last picture is a mattress factory. In Topeka, a bunch of women were hired to produce mattresses. Were they hired because there was a shortage of mattresses? Or was this program created because jobs were needed and this was somebody could be trained to do? Alright, so we need to make our connection now. So what's similar between the 2 policy debates? Times of crisis, the government coming and creating social safety nets. What was unique about the past policy? What caused the crisis then? It was the stock market crash. What's causing the crisis today? Sure, the economy has gone bad, but what led to a bad economy today? It's the coronavirus, right? Okay, so finishing the assignment, you are done for what's required. If you want to finish the bottom, that's worth 100 points extra credit. Remember that if you have questions, stop by the Zoom session or send me an email or call me on the number that I listed earlier on Classroom. Take care, everyone.